So recently I've been catching up on Star Wars and Disney Star Wars, specifically the Clone Wars. And I've been enjoying it. I'm trying to get as much content in as I can because I'm just like, I'm so done with this franchise that I don't really see any enjoyment in anything coming up. I mean, besides roasting the Acolyte, this franchise is so dead to me that I'm having a hard time enjoying everything, so I'm trying to get in some old stuff that I haven't seen before, but I've been doing a lot of research on some of the themes and some of the sort of story elements of the Clone Wars, and the prequels more specifically, because I'm trying to get inspiration for writing my own story. That is something that will be down the line, and I will let all of you know in the future. But basically, there's this argument online, right? There's this argument about Star Wars being political, right? So that you've seen it on my channel, you've seen it, everywhere else. Everybody says, "Oh, Star Wars is either too political or it's not political enough." So let me break this down for you. The argument here is that, let's say Disney Star Wars, right? Disney Star Wars comes out with the sequel trilogy and Rebels and everything else that it comes out with, and a lot of people like me, and a lot of people who are in sort of my sphere or believe with, what I believe, say that Star Wars went too political. Or in this case, because I refuse to use the word woke if it's something that doesn't really apply, because the term woke has been thrown around by boomercons way too often, and it's annoying. So I do think, though, that politics is a part of it. Now, what people mean by politics in Star Wars, specifically in Disney Star Wars, is identity politics. That is what people most have a problem with. And the often response by Disney shills, freaks, weirdos, Raylos, you name it, these Disney Star Wars people, they defend this stuff by saying Star Wars has always been political. George Lucas always made it political. So is it called star politics? I'm just curious. If you go far back as the original trilogy, right? They like to make the excuse that, oh, it's based off the Vietnam War. Oh, it's based off World War II. I'd like you to pull up some receipts. The closest allegory that the original trilogy had to any sort of politics was possibly the stormtroopers being an allegory for, like Nazi Germany, something like that, right? Or Hitler being Darth Vader, basically. There are some subtle things, but it always comes off, to me at least, like universal storytelling. That it's, drizzled in allegory to enhance the themes of the story. But it's not like it was something that he tried to beat you over the head with. And they're like, oh, well, what about the Emperor? Wasn't he supposed to be named after Richard M. Nixon? If you look at the context of that in the Star Wars Archives books, he says that about the prequels of the Emperor, right? He says that Anakin Skywalker was betrayed and then brainwashed by the Emperor, who turned on everybody and turned everything into a tyranny, turned the Republic into a tyranny, and his name was Richard M. Nixon. But guess what? George Lucas actually didn't call him Richard M. Nixon. He changed the dude's name to Sheev Palpatine. So he might have intentionally, at first wanted to be brash, like he says he's a brash young man. He wanted to stick it to the man, but he clearly wised up to the part where he had to make it a universal story, and he said so many times. He said that people didn't understand his universal storytelling. People to this day still don't seem to understand it, especially Disney Star Wars people, who tend to ignore it, ignore the lore, ignore the spirituality of it, ignore all of the aspects of the original trilogy. And of course, whenever George calls them out at the Cannes Film Festival that recently happened, everybody's like, oh, well, let's not treat George Lucas like he's a god or anything. He messed up the prequels. Shut the fuck up, all right? No, just stop, all right? You've lost the argument at that point, okay? You lost the argument. Now, you could make the argument that the prequels were political. Yes, the prequels were absolutely political because people actually, complained about the prequels being too fucking political. And this is where we got to make that split. We have to make that split because the politics of the prequels, again, is universal storytelling. Sure, there might be drizzled in allegory here or there, but it was up for interpretation. They didn't try to beat you over the head with it, right? So the idea here is that he was trying to take the political approach as in political intrigue, like something like House of Cards, Game of Thrones, House of the Dragon, you name it, right? Like there's political intrigue that can introduce politics into your story and work. It's worked many times over many years. The difference being is that it wasn't modern day contemporary politics that tried to beat you over the head with it. So there's still a lot of people who form their arguments off of a YouTube video they watched. And they're like, oh, well, Star Wars has always been political. The reason the sequels failed is because they weren't political enough. It's like, the sequels did not have politics in the same way that, the prequels did, because the prequels streamlined the politics to show the decay of the Republic. They showed how a corrupt republic works and how it ultimately falls to tyranny because it's so corrupt. That is the message of the story. That is the universal storytelling at play. There wasn't really any politics in the original trilogy because, I mean, how often did you see somebody talking about elections or bills or anything like that? It was mostly war because this shit is called Star Wars. He named it Star Wars because it's about the wars, not the politics. But Isaac, wars are usually based off of politics. Shut the fuck up. All right? He didn't make any politics in the original trilogy. It was about the war aspect. There is a split difference that you people intentionally ignore. And when it comes to the sequels, let me break it down for you. Identity politics is about the, the modernization or modernity of an IP, at least in the last couple of years, and Disney Star Wars was the first to start that trend, at least maybe after Ghostbusters 2016. But the idea behind it was to push a narrative. It was to beat you over the head with a narrative and influence characters and events in the story that would be appealing to a demographic of people. Let's say, for example, Rey as a character appealed to the feminine fantasy. Unfortunately, they made her halfway man because she didn't train to be a Jedi, she didn't train with a lightsaber, and she beat Kylo Ren's ass on the spot. And people were like, oh, that's awesome. Why can't you just accept that it's awesome? Because it doesn't make any fucking sense. That's why I can't accept that it's awesome. I'd love to accept if it was awesome if the bitch had training. You know what I'm saying? Like, I want to be, like, immersed into it, but I can't. Because you're not allowing me to, right? You're not giving me anything to sink my teeth into. And of course, there's a lot of people that's going to disagree with that because it's about opinions and whatnot. But they like to throw their objective truth at a subjective opinion, not knowing the difference because they're idiots. So now let's not even talk about The Last Jedi. Actually, you know what? Let's talk about The Last Jedi because the destruction of Luke Skywalker, people say, oh, that was part of his character. That was, we got to bring the character down so we could raise the other characters up. You don't need to do that. You don't need to bring Luke Skywalker down to push Rey and Poe and Finn, which you didn't even push, Poe and Finn. They got left in the fucking dirt. They ended up in the Sarlacc pit compared to Rey because she got skyrocketed. She got skyrocketed to the moon, and guess what? She ended up like Roman Reigns in 2014. All right? People booed her. It's just... And if y'all remember correctly, Benicio del Toro's character, DJ, I can't believe I've even remembered his name, he beat you over the head with some political shit too by saying, oh, both sides of the war are, warmongers and they're buying weapons. There's a lot of political allegory in there. There was a lot of identity politics allegory in there. The idea of bringing down an old hero to push a new hero, it's the idea of cultural Marxism. Culture Marxism, the tearing down of the old to uproot and rise up a new thing that people don't exactly like. We would have liked it if Rey had respectfully been a successor to Luke Skywalker, but a part of that comes from the destruction of Luke Skywalker. It would have been more fitting if Luke Skywalker was the hero we all knew him for. If Luke Skywalker showed up in The Force Awakens like he did in Mandalorian Season 2, all of our problems would have been fixed. all the problems of the sequels probably would have been fixed from there. But for whatever reason, people are like, Star Wars, the Disney Star Wars trilogy is not political enough, or it's not political at all, and therefore it wasn't successful. That's not the point. It had no politics in it because it wasn't political intrigue. It was barely even war. It was just a bunch of people moseying around, doing fetch quests, and you know, destroying our favorite characters. It was boring, it was useless, and at the end of the day, they had to resurrect an old villain, and I know what they're going to say. They're, oh, they did it in Legends 2. It was stupid in Legends 2, okay? I'll admit that. I'll be one of the many people who says, yeah, you know what? I think George Lucas hated Legends for a reason, because they brought back Palpatine, you know, they cut off Luke's hand to make a clone of him. Like, it was a bunch of stupid shit that gave ammo to all these Disney Star Wars weirdos who use it against people who dislike Disney Star Wars. But guess what? We're at a point now where my enjoyment of Star Wars is gone. Like, you can have it, you fucking freaks. All right, you can keep it for whatever I care. But whenever I make fun of the Acolyte, whenever I have a good laugh at that, or Obi-Wan Kenobi, or Book of Boba Fett, don't fucking cry like a little bitch whenever I make money off of it and make, you know, videos off of it, because I'm having a good time roasting that stupid shit. All right, you're the one who has a struggle trying to cope with the idea that I don't like it on the same level that you do. All right, or the fact that I dislike it enough to roast it. That is the fucking problem, is that you're a bunch of children who don't know how to grow up and have an opinion. And why is that? I think it's cultural Marxism. I think it's the idea of identity politics that was introduced to Star Wars in the sequel trilogy. You know where it wasn't introduced in? You know where it wasn't brought up in? Was the original trilogy and the prequel trilogy. Neither of those introduced that. Sure, you could argue a couple of things here or there in the Clone Wars, but at the end of the day, politics as the idea of universal political intrigue pretty much died, I don't know, in the Clone Wars after the prequels. You could argue that some of it ended up in Rogue One and Andor maybe, but like, because I think there's more of it in Andor, which was actually pretty interesting. It kept me going with Andor. But that's from a talented director, that's from a talented writer. Lucasfilm does not hire talented people. I'll just say that. We've seen that. And of course, they're going to be like, oh, you're wrong, you're wrong. Receipts. Show your boy receipts. Show me receipts. I literally have no idea how to argue with you dummies, because you keep bringing up the same points and I keep trying to reiterate them. And all that happens is you kick and you scream and you bitch. All right. So this idea of Star Wars has always been political. It's not called Star Politics. It's called Star Wars. The original trilogy was about a war. The sequel, or the prequel trilogy, was about the lead up to that war, the destruction of a republic to turn into a tyranny. And the sequels was the ultimate downfall of the republic that was rebuilt anew, in which they could have done that. They're bleeding it a little bit in the Mandalorian story, you know, in that sort of timeline to show you the decay of the New Republic and that they're not so great after all. But once again, that feeds into cultural Marxism. That feeds into the idea of we have to tear down the old to push our new thing. And I know that people are like, oh, but diverse casting and you know, gay kisses are not SJW propaganda. Fuck, they are. You know, how are you missing that point? But it's not even about diverse casting, dog. Like, it's about tokenization. It's about how you use the characters, not the fact that they were cast at all. People are like, you know, race baiting. Oh, you don't like Reva? You must be a freaking racist. And it's like, well, I like Mace Windu. And they're like, that's not the point. Why are you saying you like Mace Windu? Shut the fuck up, dog. All right. So politics in Star Wars has been a light thing, and at least in the original trilogy. But the sequels' lack of politics definitely led to one of its downfalls, because it didn't try to tell a story that was universal. It tried to tell a story of modernity. It tried to tell a story that appealed to a very small group of people that ultimately got bigger and bigger until about, you know, 2020. And then all of a sudden people are like, oh my God, that sucks. We should stop doing that. And yet Hollywood hasn't learned their lesson yet, and neither has Lucasfilm. And they would soon burn to the ground than ever learn a lesson. But hey, Go ahead, burn to the ground. Disney Star Wars freaks, you can have it, all right? You pushed me away as a fan. All I can do now is laugh, all right? That's all I can do now. There's no point in me even being mad anymore, all right? Y'all destroyed this franchise to the point where having a conversation and actually talking about this stuff, you know, in a way that's, you know, polite and decent is gone, all right? You got what you want, and now you're complaining that nobody else likes it, all right? So just shut the fuck up and drink your titty milk, you know, your green titty milk from, you know, Krabby Island, and keep coping. Keep coping, you weirdos. So, yeah, sequel trilogy. Look at all the problems that shit caused. If you like what you heard, like, share, subscribe, comment. Especially you Disney Star Wars freaks. I want to see you all show up in my comments. And, yeah.